This week, I'm going to be reviewing a very versatile set of books from one of my favorite manufacturers, Kobold Press, that are going to get a lot of value from both DMs and players alike. I'm really excited to talk about them, so let's jump into it. Welcome to the channel. My name is Garmin, and of course, this is the Storycraft Society. We have merch now, by the way. Really excited about that. If you're interested in picking up a baseball tee or t-shirt, there are going to be links for that in the description below. But that's not why you're here. Today, we're going to be doing another book review, and this is one that I'm really excited to talk about. I just got these. They're just so cool. I slept on them for a really long time, and I'm excited to talk about why. This is the Warlock series from Kobold Press, and specifically they have Grimoire, well, I guess Warlock Grimoire, and then of course Warlock Grimoire 2. I bought them both at the same time, so I want to call this one Grimoire 1, but I guess that's, not the case. So if you're anything like me, you probably are saying the same thing that I did, which is, Warlock, what the heck is that and why do I care? I actually am gonna kind of start by saying I think that the Warlock name is actually more artistic and less functional. It's actually my biggest issue that I have with the product, I think, is that the name just doesn't tell me what's in it, so I avoided it for a long time. I would get onto Kobold Press's website, and they of course have all kinds of products, and the little Warlock zines would show up, and it just felt, I don't know. I'm not trying to be insulting, but they felt just kind of cheesy and misplaced next to Kobold Press's amazing other products. I mean, I'm going to be doing reviews for a lot of their stuff in the future because I just really genuinely love the products. And this is just one that always kind of got overshadowed. Until now, what it was on their website was actually like an old school feeling D&D zine where every issue kind of would have a different little bit of information in it, and they were of course very, very cheap. And I think what they actually did was a Patreon for this, and it resulted in these grimoires where they took and compiled a whole bunch of the small Warlock zines into one book. They kind of reformatted them. There's just so much information for both sides of the table in these books, but I think that they're really, really useful. The price on each book is $25.99. I'll compare them to like the Monster Manual. They are a noticeable amount thicker, but they are noticeably smaller. And actually, I'm gonna be completely real, I love the size of this book. It's one of those things where I don't know that I've ever seen a 5th edition product printed in this size book before, but I don't know, something about it just stood out. Maybe because it's so unique, it felt different, but I really liked the size, and you get a lot of information. If anything, I feel like I'm a little overwhelmed with the information inside of it. And then of course I have 2 of them. I'm gonna focus on just the Warlock Grimoire. I'm not gonna look at 2. I'm gonna give you kind of a brief look at that at the end, because a lot of the information, where it is all different information, the style of information, I guess, is similar in both. So I'm just gonna focus on this one. So if you really like it, I would suggest picking up both. For now, we're just gonna look at the first one. So first things first, let's jump into the table of contents. All right, so let's jump in and start to take a look at the table of contents. We're gonna start out with Other Voices Distant Plains. So this is a nice little, I'll just actually flip to it real quick. Just a nice little essay by Wolfgang Bahr. Really enjoyed this. I just like his particular take on the whole book. A lot of cool, writer love in here. So then continuing on, we have lore and storytelling. So that's going to be a lot of things that are built around the DM and learning different areas of a world. And what I think is useful about this stuff is really that it's useful for PCs and DMs. Of course, we'll get into that a little bit more, but to flesh out a cool backstory for a character. So then we have adventure and dungeoneering. This is all going to be your little adventurers and adventure sites. You have monsters. These are all unique, interesting monsters. It's got lore that comes with them, a little bit of combat tactics, and obviously their stat blocks. Then we have NPCs. These are all really cool. Every single one of these is awesome. Then we have magic. Now this is interesting. There's a lot of different things in here, but there's a lot to do with different types of magic, and specifically we're going to be looking at spells from the fire here in a minute that are all a whole bunch of new spells that have a setting attached to them, which is cool. And then lastly, it's all of the player tools. Now, I think that this is a little bit misnamed because I think there's a lot of very good DM stuff in here as well, but we're gonna specifically be looking at Shade Voices Beyond Death to give you an idea of some of the stuff that's in here. So let's move on to part 1, which is gonna be why this book is good for the DM. Hey everybody, sorry for the quick intermission, but actually I wanted to remind you that we released these sweet Storycraft Society shirts. You can actually pick those up from our Redbubble or Teespring stores. Those will be linked in the description below. That goes a long way to helping the channel out financially if that's something that you'd be interested in. And then always be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That goes a long way to helping the channel out also. And that of course doesn't cost you anything, and it just makes everything nicer for the channel. So with all that said, let's get back to the video. Bye. All right, so the first section that we're gonna look at is the lore and storytelling section. So on the surface, it's gonna seem like a lot of this information in the lore and storytelling side is just gonna be for DMs, but I really think that that's absolutely not the case. I think a lot of this information could be distilled by a DM to be given to their players to help flesh out their backstories, but also players could just root through this information and make up backstories for a character that isn't in the particular setting, and we're gonna kind of investigate through that with specifically the first one that they give you in Grimoire, which is Folkways of the Iron Crags. So the Iron Crags are mountains in the Midgard setting. For me, they're actually my Stonefinger mountains. They are similar enough in flavor that I could take these things and start connecting them. The first thing that they give you is 6 joyous festivals, and it gives you these awesome full write-ups of festivals that you can throw into your game to make the world seem really alive and interesting. There are things like Gunnock's Rites of Ninkash, the Twin Cheese Festivals. I don't know about you, but when I hear we're gonna be going to the Twin Cheese Festivals, I'm immediately interested as a player, and my character's gonna eat all the cheese. It's gonna be amazing. The Egg Finder Festival, Blessing of the Spears and Axes, Mule Skinner's Dance, the Gold Miners Fair. These are all things, and they give you, a couple of paragraphs on each so that you could throw them into your game. Next, there are 3 famous shrines. Customs and modes of dress. I love this. One of the things that I think is kind of criminally underdone in 5th edition is talking specifically about the cultures of the places that you're gonna visit. You wanna describe your character at a beginning of a D&D session, but there's no real information out there, at least in any of the major publications, that tell you how to describe what your character would dress like from different parts of the world. I think that this is so neat. And all of this is condensed into a quick 6 pages of lore about that little area, and you can come out with so much useful stuff that you could pump into a game. So with that said, that's actually just one of the areas in the lore and storytelling. There's a whole bunch of them, and you can get all this kind of information, different kinds of information, but all this kind of information from those. So let's move on to the next section, which is adventuring and dungeoneering. So I think that this section is actually pretty straightforward. It's gonna be your more short adventures, your dungeons, and then it's gonna also be adventure sites. But all of those are really useful if you're running a game. Certainly this is more useful if you're a DM. But so as we start to look through, we're gonna jump to the very first one, which is Into the Dragon Empire, Morea and the Islands. Now, this is an area in Midgard known as the Province of Fallen Temples. It's gonna give you adventure hooks. It's gonna tell you about some of the major cities in that area. I'm not gonna go into all that because I think that's all the secondary thing as to what's important about a section like this. What they give you is then really usable, pick up and transfer to another gameable stuff. For example, it gives you treasures from Mistress Morea, which is special common items, not magic items, common items that will supplement the player's handbook for things that you can use in your game, like Moraean silk rope, which is different than regular rope. It's gonna be a Moraean net or the Moraean whip, and they're not magical items, so things like this are not gonna break your game. And I think a story that we all know as DMs is our players go to a city and all they wanna do is buy up the magic items and then are disappointed when the price is way too high for them. Going to a blacksmith and having some unique mundane items is super useful. So I think that this is a real clear area where this section, even though it's supposed to be about adventures or dungeons, the adventure sites have just as much useful information in them as well. The section continues on and eventually will actually give you the Moraean Weaver stat for a monster, so it's now a monster that's tied to these adventure sites. I think it's really useful. So that's the adventuring and dungeoneering sections. Of course, lots more information. I'm gonna say this probably in every section, but lots more information than I'm going over. So let's move on to the next section, which is super fun because it's monsters. So the monster section of this book is pretty much exactly what you're expecting, and I think that's what makes it so nice. It is just straightforward. It's going to give you lore about the monsters in each section. It's going to give you a little bit about role-playing them and their combat tactics, and then of course it's going to give you a stat block. This is all beautifully straightforward, but we're just going to talk about one of the specific monsters because it is one of the greatest monsters in any book maybe ever. And it is the necrotic tick. I'm going to say that again because I am so into it. The necrotic tick. This is a tick that will go out into the world, and instead of biting onto a regular humanoid figure, it will bite onto an undead thing, and it will suck so much necrotic energy that basically what ends up happening is it becomes infused with necrotic energy. I love this monster so much, and you'll see the beautiful black and white artwork. Again, it's very simple. It's not trying to be overdone. It's not trying to be anything that it's not, but it's got this cool artwork, and of course the stat block for the necrotic tick. Not a whole lot to say about this section other than there's just all kinds of cool monsters in here like this. All right, let's move on. Next section is going to be the magic section. This is actually a really good opportunity for me to talk about one thing that I don't particularly like about the book is I feel like so much information is spread out in so many different sections. It's a little hard to find what you're looking for. Just a little bit of complaint. Wish it was a little better, but that will explain me fumbling through these pages. So in the magic section, this is really good for DMs if you want to kind of add something to your NPCs or even give access to your players when you're doing something that you want it to seem a little extra magical. These aren't spells that you can get from the player's handbook. They are something that it's unique. Only in your game can they pick them up. We're gonna look now at one of the sections from the magic section, which is spells from the fire. And they are 14 spells that are, if your players are going to the City of Brass, this is spells that they could pick up while they're there. And now, what if your players aren't going to the City of Brass? Have an NPC who's been to the City of Brass cast some of these spells. There's just so many options, and I think it's neat. But you have things all the way from first level, all the way up to 7th level spells, but I'm just gonna kind of go over one. So I'm gonna go over a 2nd level spell from this called Fire Darts. It's a 2nd level evocation, casting time of 1 action. When this spell is cast on any fire that's at least as large as a small campfire or cooking fire, 3 darts of flame shoot out from the fire towards a target within 30 feet of the fire. Darts can be directed against the same or separate targets as the caster chooses. Each dart does 4d6 fire damage or half as much with a successful dexterity saving throw. I love a spell like this because it's so specific. It's really powerful, but it's so specific, and it makes your characters think, well, maybe we are gonna light a campfire when we camp, even though it's dangerous out there, because it will allow our one sorcerer to really take advantage of it. It makes decisions happen. I love that. And like I said, for the DM, you can sprinkle these into your game as you'd like to. That's the magic section. So with all that said, that's why this book is good for DMs. And I think every section has something that a DM will get some use out of. But I think this book is also good for players. So for this, I'm going to touch on each section again that I think has a really good dual purpose, but if I've already talked about it once in the DM section, I'm not going to talk about it too much in the player section. So the first is lore and storytelling, and I already explained why that would be really good for DMs or players, because you can use it to create more interesting backstories. I really feel this way, and I don't mean to reiterate, and probably I don't need to say it again. As players, look into the lore of the world behind your characters. It will help you to suss out your characters so much better, and you'll have so much of an easier time making role-playing decisions for that character. If you're the type of player who struggles with role-play and in the moment you always feel a little unsure, like you aren't able to really dive into that character in the moment, reading through a section like this for a dwarf character might give you that little bit of edge to be a little more confident in the decisions you make role-playing your character. So next, let's talk about the magic section. It's useful because, dang, I want to throw 3 darts that do 4d6 fire each as a 2nd level spell. That's amazing. I'm going to do so much damage. I'm going to blow something up so hard, and I will feel like I earned it so much because I was the one who was like, even though it's dangerous for us to have a fire, it will be more dangerous for them if we have a fire. You know, I just think that that's so cool. And you really feel like you're showing off a unique and interesting character if you're pulling out a spell like that, that, of course, as long as your DM allows it, is something that no one else has access to. I think this needs to be done in moderation because obviously you don't want to just take spells that make your character blow everybody else out of the water. It is a collaborative game. There's just all kinds of things in the magic section that will help you roleplay your character better if they're a spellcaster as well. So I think that section is neat also. So now that we look through those sections, we're going to talk about the most useful section to a player, which is the player section. And I mean, obviously, right? Instead of explaining all of the different things that you're going to get out of this, which you're just going to get a ton of stuff. I mean, so much stuff that it would take me a video in itself to go through all of it to just explain this section. But I'm going to paint you a picture of a character that I came up with specifically from this section of Warlock Grimoire. So I, as a player, go and talk to my DM, and I say, in the first adventure, I'm going to make a wood elf ranger. I want this wood elf ranger to be a young, innocent wood elf who had just left home from his village in the woods, and he's now getting ready to march out and see what the world is like. You know, he knows the woods. He gets the woods. He doesn't get the rest of the world. So he's going to meet up with the other PCs, and in the first adventure, I want him to die. This is where my character starts. My character will become a shade, and I will read this section to you so that you get an idea. A shade possesses a physical body that looks, acts, and feels similar to a living member of their original race, at least superficially. Shades must breathe, consume food, drink, and require shelter from adverse weather. Despite the functional similarities to a living body, a shade isn't composed of flesh and blood. Their bodies are a memory of who they once were, inhabited and quickened by the presence of their soul. Exhaustion, deprivation, and injury take their toll on a shade's body, disrupting their body's ability to maintain the connection to their soul. Food, drink, and air aren't necessary to nourish their bodies, but merely to help them maintain the sense of being a living, breathing creature. Similarly, shades appear to sleep, but they do not require it. The more injured or exhausted a shade, the less corporeal they appear. The colors of their body wash out to pale, desaturated tones, and light begins to pass through them. Blood from their wounds starts out as red and vibrant as any humanoid's, but closer to death, their wounds cease to bleed and seem to evaporate at the edges. This character, who is so innocent and left home to see the world, now adventures with the other PCs as a literal shade of the wood elf that he was. I wouldn't have come up with this character if I wouldn't have seen this section. I can't tell you how excited I got as all of the gears started to turn. This clear vision of this wood elf came to my mind. What happens when he goes home for the first time after becoming a shade? Will his family realize that it's not really him? I don't know. But that's what I got from this section, and dang if I don't think that that is awesome. I will be playing that character. Just wait. I will be playing that character. Or maybe the PCs will run into that character. I don't know. See, player section's even good for DMs. Love, love, love the player section, and there's all kinds of stuff like this. Lastly, there's a whole bunch of just random various things throughout the book that is really, really useful for players. These are things like the mundane items, the normal, not magical weapons that are unique and different. I think those are just so useful. There's magic items in here that could help to inspire a character or a story arc of a character, that sort of thing. All of those are just little nuggets that you have to really search each and every page of the book to find the treasure at the end, and I really think that it's worth it. And like I said, I bleed through these two sections a lot because a lot of the things that are really useful for the DM is really useful for the player as well, and vice versa. So that's my kind of quick summary as to why I think this book is useful for the player as well as the DM. So now that we've had an opportunity to look at the first grimoire, Let's look at the second one. We're just gonna take a quick second to flip through the table of contents here and give you an idea of what you can get out of the next book. So if you notice, a lot of the sections are built exactly the same way. I think this is really smart. That way you can flip through both books and have a good idea of what you're gonna be getting. So there's obviously a lore and storytelling bit, another bit of adventures and dungeoneering. Then there's a couple of new monsters, NPCs, magic, and then players. All of the stuff in here is unique and new information, and some of the stuff, boy, it's cool. Bunch of different new halfling sub-races in here. Lots of good stuff. I'm not gonna go into it. But anyway, that's a quick look at what you would get if you get book 2. All right, so that's all I have for this video. Hopefully it has inspired you to want to go pick up a copy of one of the two or both of the Warlock Grimoires. I just think that these cool 5e supplement books just get so many gears flowing in a way that I've been playing 5th edition since it came out. I don't have a whole lot of experience with the other editions, but this one I feel like I've learned and understood most of it from the top to bottom, and when it starts to feel a little stale, getting a book like this just reinvigorates all of my love for both role-playing games and 5th edition in general. I linked where you can pick the books up in the description below, so if that's something you're interested in, you can check it out down there. And also, I will link our merchandise store down in the description below because we have baseball tees and t-shirts for sale over at Redbubble and Teespring. If you wanted to pick one of those up, it would go a super long way to helping the channel out, and wow, anybody and everybody who has supported that way so far, I would thank you, and thank you so much. Leave a comment down below and let me know, is there something about these books that really gets you excited? Do you think that they're useful? Is it something that you would want to use? Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you want to see more videos like this, or to learn how to craft either terrain into your stories or just craft stories in general. This is the channel for you. But other than that, I've got nothing else to say other than until next week, I'll be seeing you. What's up, everybody? I am so stoked for Craft of the Day #1. Been really excited to start doing this, and now we're gonna do it. So #1 is gonna be one of the OG subscribers, Gnome Depot. He has been tagging the Storycraft Society in his projects. I mean, it seems like since the very beginning. Dude, I cannot thank you enough for all the support you've given the channel over the last year, and I felt that there was no one who deserved it more than to be the official Craft of the Day #1. Of course, this is gonna happen every week, so everybody is gonna hopefully get a chance to be part of this, but let's jump into it. So I jumped onto Gnome Depot's Instagram here. So as I'm looking through it, we can see that we've got this like town set up and a little pillar. He's got a bunch of miniatures that he's painted. I am so jealous of your ability to paint miniatures. He's got all kinds of just little bits and bobs. I'm so into all of it. But specifically, the thing that he tagged us in is actually, talk about going all the way back. He tagged us when he made the hills from literally, I think it was episode 4, maybe. And what I really like about this project, actually a lot better than mine, is he has a lot more cool textures in his. All I had was, you know, my flat grass texture. He's got rocks and sticks. He's got just all kinds of, you know, the little like bushes, but he's got the colored bushes instead of my green ones. Actually, I think, no, there's a little green one in there too. And what I'm gonna take away from looking at his piece is that I think I need to start adding more textures to get a more realistic, varied landscape. Not just grass and bushes, but adding grass and rocks and sticks and all that sort of thing. This is so awesome. It was amazing to see what you've done, Gnome Depot. Goodness gracious, all of the miniatures that you painted. We have that Critical Role set, by the way, and ours are all, of course, setting unpainted. So very jealous of all that as well. So with that said, I'll be signing off until next week's Craft of the Day. Let's go. Whew. Oh, I forgot. The same guy who sent me the random box to do the crafting videos from the last couple of weeks, he actually dropped off another gift at my house, and it is the most amazing aluminum play button for me hitting 1,000 subscribers. Now, a lot of people, I think, know that you hit, you know, your silver subscribe button when you get 100,000 subs, and what's gold, 1 million? He thought that it was not cool that I didn't get a play button for 1,000 subs, so he made me this fantastic aluminum play button in all of its poorly washed glory, and I just think that this is the greatest thing ever. I laughed for like 20 minutes. That's not even a joke. This is one of the greatest things he's ever given me, and dude, you're so awesome. Anyway, aluminum play button. Let's go.